Hey everybody, my name is Dowden, and in this video we're going to be learning how to make music like RÜFÜS de Soul. RÜFÜS de Soul are an Australian trio, and they combine live elements into electronic music for a really unique experience. Their live shows consist of keyboards and synths, as well as live drums or live electronic drums, and a live vocalist. Their music is a really nice fusion between progressive house music, and a bit more down-tempo and ambient stuff, with really beautiful melodies, but also consisting of high energy stuff as well. So for this example of RÜFÜS de Soul, we're going to make drums that sound like this. We have a pretty groovy deep house style bass line that sounds like this. And then we have some really great melodies to tie the whole track together, and it sounds like this. The way the song is structured leaves room for vocals, so if you yourself are a vocalist or know somebody that is, then you can experiment with adding your own vocals into it. But unfortunately, I'm not a very good singer, so I left that part up to you. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and then we're going to jump into things. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this is starting with the kick, and then I'm going to move into the drums, and then I'm going to go to some of the melodic elements, skipping the bass, and then coming back to the bass, and just some things to complete the track. I'm only going to be using Serum and stock plugins for this video. If you don't have Serum, you can follow along with Wavetable or a different synth that you have. The same ideas are there. You just have to, work from your VST and your plugin using the same ideas that I'm using in my plugins. I'm also going to recycle a lot of the sounds just to show you that you don't need to keep reaching for a new patch every single time you're creating a sound. Let's start with the kick drum. I just have this kick that I've created. It's going to be included in the project file. All the samples and all the sounds will be included in the project file, as well as the presets. So make sure to go in the description and grab that. And let's go ahead and put this on every quarter note. Okay, so now we're just going to create our drum loop here. I'm going to create a MIDI clip. So I have two closed hats that I've chosen here, this one and this one. So with RÜFÜS de Soul, a lot of their drums are actually played live, or they have their live drummer recording their stuff. So you want to have them pretty organic sounding. You want to have them humanized and make them feel like they're not so robotic and electronic. So I'm going to grab just this first hat here is going to be in the center of the mix. I want that to be centered in case we down mix to mono. I want it nice and strong, but it is a little bit low. So I'm going to grab an EQ and throw it on that one channel. And I guess we can draw out some MIDI first. And I'm going to just slightly change the position of these hats, just very slightly. Let's move it over just a fraction. Just one small increment. And then I'm going to duplicate that. And maybe I'll move this one over a slight amount, maybe this one as well. And then we'll just duplicate this whole thing again. And that's just going to give us a tiny bit of humanization, making it feel like it's not exact. It's not robotic. It's not, so repetitive to the ear. And it's going to just be a little bit more subconsciously interesting. As well as that, I'm going to change the velocities of the notes. And I'm going to do that with the velocity tool. So it's a MIDI effect, and I'm just going to turn up the random to about maybe 12. Just something so that the hats don't sound the exact same every single time, and we can listen to that with the kick. So you might hear that some of them are a little bit quieter, very slight amount, but just something to give us a little bit of humanization. Cutting out that low end because I don't really want it. And then this hat, I'm going to use some width. I'm going to make it feel a little bit wider and more interesting as well. So I'm going to grab the Has effect and throw that on the second channel. So the Has effect, if you haven't watched any of my other videos, I talk about it and put it in pretty much every video. Essentially, it is just a stereo delay. It is a stereo delay from left to right or right to left. And it is just having your signal go from one side to the other in just a small amount of time, so small that it sounds like one sound, and it's going to sound very wide. So you just use a delay plugin, and you know what? I'll just go right from the scratch here. So we'll grab a delay, throw that on the hat, change this. So now it's at time, bring them both down to 1 millisecond, and then we're going to turn off the chain, bring the feedback down to 0, and the dry wet up to 100%. So now what we're going to hear is the total wet sound of the left signal playing, and then switching this back to time, going down, we're going to bring it up to about 10 or 12 milliseconds. And every time this plays now, I'll just solo the hat. It's going to play from left to right with a 7 millisecond difference. And we go this a little higher, a little bit more obvious. But we just want it just slight, so it's just tricking our ears to thinking it's very wide. Perfect. Now both together. Maybe put this first hat down in volume a little bit. And then we can send a little bit of that to a reverb return track. I have this return track, D drum reverb. So I have a reverb with this low cut on and 100% with a pretty quick decay time. And that's going to be my drum reverb. I'm going to send all my drums to that. And there we go. Now we have some reverb on there. Cool. Moving on to the shakers. So then the shakers, another MIDI clip, and I'm going to draw in some MIDI information. And again, I want this to be more realistic sounding. I don't want this to be the exact same thing every single time. So I'm going to draw in, start with this, bring this one down a little higher. And then this one can go like this. Pretty common to see when you're doing your shakers, your backbeat, to have this like this. So we'll go like this, we'll duplicate it all the way across. And then I'll grab the velocity tool again and throw that on the shakers. And we'll turn the random up to about 25. You can hear that it's moving quite a bit now in terms of velocity, but it's pretty harsh sounding. I'm going to actually take this hat and I'm going to fade it in a little bit, and that's going to make it feel like more of a shaker. We're getting rid of that transient and fade out as well, so it's not so long. Perfect. Sounds much more like a shaker now. And then again, add that stereo delay effect. I have it saved as a preset, so it is easier for me to grab, so I don't have to redo it every single time. Maybe this time we'll go from the opposite way. We'll go from right to left. Again, let's actually add some reverb onto the channel, because I want this to be a little bit more in the background. I want it to be a little bit softer on the ears. Great. Let me turn it down a little bit. Next, we'll move on to the clap. So I have this clap chosen, and the drums for RÜFÜS are essentially, at least in this track, they're going to be pretty simple. They're just going to be a really basic beat. We're going to focus more on the groove and the bass line. A lot of RÜFÜS's tracks, they'll have, you know, a couple little hits here and there to make it a little bit more interesting. So let's go into this clap and we will add another one here. So let's go like this. And we'll add one here as well. We can go into the hats, add maybe something here. Maybe something over here. And maybe one more over here. And let's take a listen. Cool. I don't like the clap so much, so I'm going to bring that actually. Cool. And then I'm going to cut some of that clap out. It's a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too crunchy. Fade in a tiny bit. And fade out a little bit. Some EQ. I'm going to take some of that bite out of that little really crunchy right here. I don't want that. Maybe bring the high end up a little bit. Cool. And then we can move on to the ride. So I'm going to bring in this ride cymbal. It's going to be more of a way to texturize and glue the whole drum loop together. It's going to give us this nice airy backdrop of essentially glue that's just going to help this whole thing feel it much more together, and it's going to fill up a lot of that empty space. So I'm going to draw the MIDI clip, and on the same beats as the hat, so I can just actually duplicate this over, and we're going to have this pretty quiet. Again, I don't want it to be so aggressive, so I'm going to fade in the beginning and fade out. It's not so long. Great, and then I'm going to add some reverb to this as well. I want this to be very washed out and more in the background. So I'll use a reverb and put that up to maybe 50 or 60%. Pretty decent decay time. Maybe a little bit less. It's a little bit obvious right now, but with the context of the rest of the track, it'll sound a little bit less obvious, and it'll help the track breathe a bit. And that's it for the drums for now until we get into the arrangement. So let's move on to some of the synths that I'll be using inside of the track. So I'm going to skip the bass. I'm going to go into the synths, and I already have the MIDI information laid down. I didn't want to spend time recreating all the MIDI or forgetting anything that I put in. So I just have the MIDI in. I'm going to explain how I got there. So the first chords are really simple. They're just triads. So it's just 3 notes within the scale that I'm using, which is D sharp minor. So if we open this up, we can actually take a look. And if you don't grab the project file, you can just go ahead and copy the MIDI information just by looking at it. It's really simple. And if you're not great at writing chords and you want to learn how to write stuff like this, or you're just having a hard time writing music with chords, really simply just start with the key of the track that you're in. So my kick is in D sharp. I know the track is in D sharp. Just grab your keyboard. I know it's kind of hard to see, but you grab your keyboard and just start at one note, so D sharp, and play the octave of the D sharp, and then play a note in the middle. And you start to find that these chords aren't that difficult when you're just playing essentially 2 notes with an octave. So you have the D sharp, then you have the octave of the D sharp, and then you have a middle note, and you can kind of play around with it until it starts to sound good. We can't hear anything because I haven't put in the piano that I'm going to be using, so we're going to search for simplest piano and drag and drop that in. If you're using Ableton 11, I think it's called Simple Grand Piano or something similar. So try that again with the D sharp, then the octave. I'll bring this back up. The octave, and then find a note in the middle. And I'm only moving one finger. And then what I do for these chords over here to make it a bit more complex is actually just use my second hand and play the chords, and then use my second hand to play another note on top. So and that's just an easy way to get some really nice emotional sounding chords. You're obviously going to make some mistakes, and that's all part of learning, but for this example, I kept it pretty simple. I did record this live, and the benefit to recording live is that we don't have everything perfect. So you get this more realistic and humanized approach, which is, again, what RÜFÜS de Soul is all about. They do their live sets. They have amazing live sets, and they play live because it just sounds so organic and so good. By recording this way, actually live recording it on a keyboard, then we can make essentially a little bit of error and not be perfect, which makes it sound more organic and realistic and humanized. You have the different velocities, you're hitting the notes differently, not as hard or not as soft as the other notes. So if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you can do this manually by drawing it in, move things over. And if you do record and it's too out of the place, you can obviously quantize in your quantize settings, maybe bring it to 90 or 95%, so it's not perfect. So now that we have the melody of the chords explained a little bit and how you can get there on your own, let's dive into the actual creation of this really cool pad, this piano type pad that I made. Inside the simpler, you have this loop function, but I'm going to turn it into the sampler. So you get a couple more controls with that, and I just prefer the interface a little bit more. So I'm going to turn on the sustain mode over here. So this is going to loop it back and forth when we hold the note. And then we have this release mode, which is going to do this essentially the same thing with the release. So before I play out the chords, I'm going to get this pad to a better state. So I'm going to bring down the, I'll bring up the sample start a little bit. I don't want it to be so aggressive when it plays. So I'll bring this up so it's missing most of that initial transient. Maybe go to about 10,000. The sample starts at 10,000. We'll go to the loop start and we'll put this up. We want to loop it around here where we're not getting the transient, but we're not getting too much of the tail. We'll bring the loop end down as well. And I'll bring that down around there. We're going to grab the bulk of that sound without going too much into the tail. And then we'll go to the sample end, bring this down to about around the same area. So now if we play this and we hold the note, we're going to have a loop. It's going to play back and forth. But it's a little bit too obvious. We can hear it kind of wafting back and forth. So I'm going to turn on this crossfade. And the crossfade I'm going to bring up so that it kind of blends into the loop a little bit on both ends. And we'll put this up as well. So we're grabbing the end and crossfade up as well. This down a little bit. So now let's listen to the chords with this piano loop, and I'll throw some reverb on there so it sounds even better. Okay, let's take a listen. Maybe move this up just a little bit so we don't get that attack so much. There we go, it's a little bit better. Great, so that sounds really good actually. And then we can maybe throw an EQ on there just to be safe that we're not getting too much low information on this one. Perfect. Now I have these other chords that are just the exact same chords as the first MIDI clip, but I've added an additional note on top. Adding a fourth note onto these gives it a bit more expression. It makes it more emotional, and you can kind of play around with it to make it even more expressive than just 3 notes. So let's take a listen to the whole piano layout here. Both sets of chords, first the less emotional ones and then the more emotional ones. You can feel that difference between the two, and it's really important, and it's really easy to do. Just set up your triads, your 3 notes, and then add a fourth on top. If you make mistakes, that's totally okay, and if you are really good at playing piano, then you already know. So now we're moving on. We're going to duplicate this entire piano track. I mentioned that I'd be recycling sounds, and this is the first of many. So I'm going to take all the MIDI information, and I'm just going to drop it down 1 whole octave. I'm going to do the same here. Drop it down 1 whole octave. This is going to be more of a lower kind of bassy piano because we don't have bass line in this section. We have a lot of room for low frequencies, so I'm going to really push the low end of this. So I have this EQ that I put on. I'm actually going to change that so that it doesn't remove the low end, and actually I'm going to remove a lot of the high end. So it's a bass line, but it's not really just a bass line. It's so dynamic and so warm sounding because we have so many harmonics. We have so much warmth and frequency going on here and movement that it's bringing more to the table than just a sub bass would. Super simple. We do have reverb on it, which can be a little bit dangerous. So I'm just going to remove that, and should still sound pretty good. Moving on to this saw pad. So this is going to be a Rufus Du Sol inspired pad. This is going to be really obvious to you if you've heard the amazing song Inner Bloom. They have it in their breakdown where they take this super saw pad and they slightly detune it in certain sections, and it sounds almost like it's playing on maybe a record and they slow it down really quickly with the pitch, or it's just an analog synth where they're adjusting the tuning really quickly. It sounds really, really nice. So I've already copied and pasted those into here. They're the exact same. And let's go ahead and grab a serum. So let's go put this on. So it's a totally new patch. So we have oscillator A and oscillator B. I'm going to put up the unison to about 5. Well, not about 5. I'll put it to 5 on both channels, and I'll bring the octave of the second channel down. Then I'm going to put the detuned down a little bit. I don't want it super, super detuned. Definitely want it a little bit detuned though. And then I'll turn on this sub frequency and put it to this oscillator here. We're going to add this as a third oscillator. We're not going to use it as a sub, but actually a third saw wave so that we can have even more richness in the low end of this sound. Then I'm going to probably have to bring the octave up, but I'll have to double check. And then I'm going to turn on the noise oscillator. So the noise oscillator is going to give us that white noise. It's going to fill up a lot of the empty space and make that pad feel very, very full. And we'll turn this from AC hum. We'll put this to just bright white, or yeah, we'll go bright white. Okay. I'm going to turn my filter on so I don't destroy my ears, and make sure that I have it on A, B, noise, and sub. So we're filtering out every generator here, everything that we're pushing sound through. And let's put this to 12 is fine, maybe 18. And let's solo that saw pad and take a listen. It's a very full pad. You have a lot of information there. Let's put the pitch up to a slight bit on both of these. So 5 and -5, just to make it even more detuned and wide. Let's put envelope 1, which is controlling our amplitude. Let's put a slower attack, maybe not too fast, not too slow. And then we'll have a pretty long release. Next, I'll go into the effects, and I'm going to add some chorus, just a little bit, even more width, and of course, reverb. Let's add some hyperdimension as well to really make it wide. Might be a little bit too detuned, so I'll pull this down a little bit. Okay, and now for the fun part, the nice tuning effect that we get. So I'm going to go into the matrix, and I'm going to put the source to LFO 1, so low frequency oscillator 1. We're going to put the amount, we'll leave it at 0 for now, but I'm going to put the destination to global master tuning. So when we increase this, it's going to follow this LFO. So what I'm going to do with this LFO is just put a little peak here and a little peak here. And then maybe one really, really small one over here. A little bit bigger. And then when we play a note, it's going to be a little bit fast. So I'm going to bring this rate down really, really slow. It's going to pass this, and it's going to change the parameter of the master tuning. But this is really important. We have to change this type. Its stock comes with this left-right arrow. We have to have it on the right arrow. I'm not sure if it's positive or negative, but if we don't have it on the right arrow, when we increase the amount, we're going to hear this. And it's going to change the overall tuning over everything. So I'll put this amount to 2 or 3. Let's put it to 3. So we'll put the arrow type just to the right, and we'll go back. We'll change this to 2 bar. It's a little bit faster, and let's hear how it sounds now. So we have that little bit of wow, a little bit of detune. You like that? Wow. Last, we're going to use some EQ and reverb on this saw pad. So I'll take the low end out. We don't want it. We have that bass already in the piano. Let's put a little bit more reverb on there. Moving on to the lead, I'm going to duplicate this saw pad. So I'm going to just go ahead and grab that serum patch and bring it onto the lead. Again, we're recycling sounds. Open this up, and I'm just going to turn it into this lead sound. So I'm going to bring the detune down a bit. I don't want it so detuned. Maybe bring my voices down a little bit. And I'll get rid of the hyper dimension. And I'll get rid of the chorus, actually. I don't want it to be that detuned for a lead. Bring this cutoff down, turn this to 24. So we're going to be reducing more with the filter. Turn the resonance off. And then I'm going to take this attack, I'm going to bring that back down. I'm going to take the release, bring it down a little bit. And then I'm going to use envelope 2 to shape this into more of a pluck sound. So I'm actually going to get rid of the noise in the sub oscillators. I don't need those anymore either. Grab envelope 2, throw that on there. And then I already have the MIDI information laid out. And what I did is just took the note from the piano chords that I had. So there's the D sharp, the A sharp, the F, the G sharp, and the F sharp. Then what I did is just put them in double time. So instead of following the exact pattern of putting them over the course of 2 bars, I put them so that they're in quick succession after each other, just an 1/8 note apart. And let's take a listen now. I'm gonna bring the octave up and duplicate that over. And let's make sure that we have our filtering right. So I'm gonna open this up a bit more. I'm gonna bring the sustain down, release up a little bit, and decay down. I'm actually gonna bring this down 1, and I'm gonna push one of the oscillators up. So I have this wide spread of a high and a low here. Let's take a listen. I'm gonna bring the sustain up a little bit actually as well on here. I'm gonna release. Duplicate that over. Okay, cool. So now we have that, but there's a lot of low end. So I'm going to EQ that out for sure. I'm going to add a delay. And I'm going to put one of these to 4. Maybe put that one of these to 2 and one of these to 3 so that they're a little bit different. And we're still getting a little bit of that detune, which is nice. Maybe I'll push the detune up a little bit more on here. Sounding really good. Push the high end up a little bit. There we go. I'm going to take the reverb off of here because I don't want to add delay to the reverb. I want to add reverb to the delay. So I'm going to put the reverb at the end of the chain. A little bit more release time on there. So let's actually jump to the bass line for now before we do the second lead. So I'm going to go up to the bass area here. So I'm going to have 3 layers of bass. I'm going to have a top bass, a mid, and a sub. So I'm going to actually duplicate the saw pad again. So I have, I'll duplicate the saw lead. I'll bring it up to this top bass here. So I'm going to grab that. And already we can take a listen to it. I've just turned this MIDI information into more of a bass line by kind of breaking up the notes so that they're a little bit groovier. Let's take a listen. We have that detune on there still. I don't want that on my bass line, so I'm going to take that off. Take this off here, take this off here. Effects, I don't want any effects on there. And maybe push the drive up a little bit. Bring this octave down. And maybe bring it down one more time. And this one down. And we still have this master tuning. I'm going to turn that off as well. Just put the amount down to 0. And just like that, we're repurposing sounds. We don't have to start all the way over. Put a little bit more release on there. So great, so now we have this top layer of bass. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to go back to the top layer, and I'm going to EQ out anything that I don't need, which is going to be anything really below there. We're in D sharp, so essentially we don't need anything below this high D sharp. So I'll filter out everything below the lowest note, which is actually, I think, an F sharp. Or maybe an A sharp. So we'll be right there. We're not going to have, actually, we'll go right down to here because we're not going to have overlapping frequencies here. So what I'm looking for is that the top layer cuts out most of the information that I don't want it to interfere with the mid or the sub. So I'm cutting where I know that the second level of bass or the second layer isn't going to be actually sitting. So I'll go into the mid bass and I'll bring everything down an octave. So I'll just consolidate this and we'll grab everything, bring it down one octave and take a listen. Grab my EQ. You know what? Instead of putting a sub on, for the sake of time, everybody knows how to put a sub on. I'm just going to put this to low bass, and we'll include the bass frequencies in this low bass for the sub. So we can see here we have the sub frequencies. It sounds really nice. Let's go ahead and cut out everything that we don't need from that top bass. So again, I'm going to put this to a 4 times, and there we go. We have a bit of overlap, so I'll just cut this a little bit and this a little bit. And I'm going to push up this higher octave a little bit as well, so we get that nice warmth of those mids. Then we can compress these together really lightly. I won't go too much to compression for this video. Just very light compression. And then I want to put another compressor, and I want to sidechain that from the kick. And you know what? I actually only want to sidechain the low bass. I don't really want to sidechain the whole thing because it's starting to sound a little bit bouncy. So perfect. One more thing I'm going to add to this top bass is a little bit of delay, but we have to be careful not to muddy up our mix. So I'm going to just put a little bit of delay with some filtering as well, so that if I change this to here, we're only going to be delaying the signal from this filter. Just a little something to keep, to fill up that space a bit more. So now what I'm going to do is the final lead sound, and then we're going to move into arrangement. So now we're going to duplicate this top bass again into the final lead sound. So we'll go all the way down into our second lead. And now the second lead is following the exact same as the piano. We'll change this color to red or to pink or fuchsia if you're a color elitist like some people are. And we will change this to be a more of a atmospheric kind of really gritty background pad, pad slash lead. And what we're going to do that is by adding a little bit of attack, not very much, and really processing this with effect. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Let's listen to the sound by itself. Nothing special. The beauty of the sound, and I'm going to turn the master tuning back on actually, because it's going to be a pretty cool sound. The beauty of this is going to be with the processing. So I'm going to add on, first and foremost, a saturator. The saturator is going to be pretty, it's going to really cook this bad boy up. We're going to get a real nice crisp onto the sound. So I'm going to put the analog clipping to hard curve. That's going to really squish it, really crunch it. And the drive I'm going to put up to about 12. And then I'm going to bring the output down half of that, so -6. And then the dry wet, 100%. And let's take a listen now. It's pretty crispy. I'm going to throw a ton of delay on that and a ton of reverb. And you can tell I'm far into the video because I'm getting a little wonky with what I'm saying. So I'll have the dry wet, I'm going to put 50%, and the dry wet on the reverb, I'm going to put past 50. So we're actually going to be getting more of the wet signal than the dry, and that's going to push it really far. Well, it's going to push it further back into the mix, and it's going to make it a little bit less in your face and less aggressive, especially since it's such a gritty sound. And then again, I'm going to change one of these to 5. So we're getting 2 different sounds of delay. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add an arpeggiator onto that. And this is where the magic really comes in. So check this out. It's still a little bit much, a little bit aggressive. Let's fine tune some things. Let's put the gate up a little bit, and let's put the dry wet of the delay and the reverb up a little bit more. Now, when that first note hits, it's actually a little bit less quieter than the delay, and it kind of fades in and out from each other. And last thing I'll do is add some auto filtering, and actually some auto pan as well. Let's put some auto pan on there. So 2 auto filters, and I'm going to show you why. So the first auto filter, I'll just turn off for now. The second auto filter, I'm going to put an LFO on. So this LFO is going to move the filter closed and opened like this, by just a slight amount, and I'll put that to 12, so it's only removing 12 dB per octave, and we're just gonna give it a little bit more movement to that sound. And of course, don't want to forget EQ, so I'll put some EQ on before the delay. Okay, and the second auto filter is just going to be for the arrangement purposes, so we'll touch on that in a minute. But that is essentially it for all the drums, leads, pads, chords, everything in the bass line. We're going to get into arrangement. I always think these videos aren't going to take so long, but they end up taking long. I want you to let me know in the comments right now. Let me know if this length of video is a good length. Is it too long? Is it too much information? Should I go even further into detail? Let me know so I can make these videos better for you, my audience, my patrons, my support. So go ahead, take 2 seconds and just let me know in the comments, pause the video, if this is an appropriate amount of time, or if I should go a little bit more in detail or a little bit less. And then let's dive into the arrangement. So finally, we're going to get into the arrangement of things. Drums are going to be super simple. I'm just going to duplicate these over, and I'm just going to cut out these kicks here. Super, super simple. And I'm going to move this over actually for now. We don't actually start the track with the drums. I'll move them over here and move down to the bass line. I'm going to move the bass line over as well. We don't need it yet. We're going to be focusing on the melodies first. The way that I've structured this track is it's not going to be club oriented like RÜFÜS' soul tracks sometimes are. They start maybe with melodies and chords and things. So that's how I did it here. So we have the lead. I'm going to bring in over here. This lead I'll bring in over here. Get rid of that. And then I'm going to have some automation. So I'm going to automate this lead so that the filter cutoff starts really, really low so that we actually can't hear it right away. Perfect. And we'll bring this up. Okay, we'll touch on that after. Then I have these saw pad chords, the same thing. I'm going to change the cutoff. So configure, cutoff, definitely bringing that down at the beginning. And we'll bring those up as the track progresses. We'll keep this a pretty quick arrangement. What I want to do here is actually really, really rise this up at the very end. And it's going to increase tension for what feels like it's going to be kind of like a drop or maybe even a breakdown. And we'll go into this like nice empty space where we let the track breathe. You'll understand when I show you. So then we have the piano chords here, low, saw pad, very nice. And I'll do the same thing with the lead here. And I think I'm going to tone this down a little bit in the high end as well. It's a little sharp on the saw pad here. And then I'm going to duplicate over the piano chords into the breakdown. I'm just going to add a locator here to let myself know that that's where the drums come in. That's the drop. I'm going to bring in the bass line here, actually. Duplicate this over. And for the last one, I'm going to just take this mid note here, this first, I think it's a D sharp. And that's going to kind of build tension into the drop. And I'm going to automate the EQ as well, that it cuts into it before the drop happens. Perfect. Moving on, we have the lead sound, and I'll bring in the second lead sound over here, and we're pretty much ready to go. I'm going to add in some white noise. So I have a white noise generator that I've created. It's just an operator using a white noise generator, oscillator, and then I have this gain as my automation. I will put this up here, 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 here. Okay, so now I'll bring this one up a little bit. Shaboom, shaboom. So it's just going to be controlling the utility, which is in turn controlling the volume of the white noise. And then I just create MIDI over the whole area. And I duplicate this over. And now I have white noise throughout my whole track, and I just control it with the volume. So with it at 0, it's obviously going to be off, and then I can just turn it up whenever I want. Okay, we have the lead coming in. We'll keep building the lead up throughout this breakdown. Duplicate that over. And then I'm going to add a snare roll to kind of build up. I'll just grab a new snare, actually. Sure. And we'll throw that in here. Go up a little bit more. Kind of do like a more fun one, not just a repetitive. Like this. Toot, toot, toot. Duplicate that over. That over here. Then we'll go to the generic double timing. And by this time, we will have EQ'd most of this out. So grab an EQ, take out that most of that low end, and then automate here. We're always kind of rising up and building that tension more and more. And then reverb, dry wet. So I'm going to put the dry wet pretty high so it's really nice and spacey. And then as the track keeps progressing, you know, this build up progresses, I'm going to put the dry wet up really, really high so that it builds and kind of dissipates the snare roll. So let's take a listen. We'll grab that same snare and go down here and we'll put in this impact. So it'll go right at the drop, reverb, huge reverb here. Okay, so I just had a quick listen through, pause the video, and I think that this breakdown is a little bit too long, so I'm going to move everything over a little bit. So I'll just grab all this here, move this over, move the drum roll over, and get rid of this here. Move this all over. And move the automation over. Okay, so I find the lead to be a little bit too low. I'm going to bring this octave up 1 to the 0, and I'm going to put this sub back on with the sawtooth and turn the volume down a little bit. So we have a little bit of that low. The octave is at 0 now. It's a bit higher, but more full in the mids, and we don't have so much low. Okay, so I'm going to do a really quick mix down of everything. Bring the kick down just a little bit. The drums, I think the hats need to be a little bit louder, and the clap's fine. The ride could be a little bit louder. Snare roll can go down a little bit. I'm just showing you this really quickly in case you're wondering why it sounds different. The bass, I'm going to bring to 6.3, and then the lead I'm bringing down to -5.8. Second lead I'll bring up. I'm going to actually change the octave of the second lead. I'm going to bring it even higher. Duplicate that over. The impact is down a lot in volume, and I'm going to bring the shakers up a little bit more so we get a little bit more groove out of this. Okay, so I went in, listened to the track, and made some very small adjustments to some of the volumes just so that it felt a little bit more balanced. I didn't add any other processing, any other effects or anything, no automation changes. I just adjusted the volume so that it would be the best that it can inside the project for the video and for the project file. So let's take a listen one last time to everything from the beginning of the track. And as you're listening to the track, I want you to imagine what it would sound like with the lead singer of RÜFÜS Du Sol's vocals singing over this track, because I can't sing for you, unfortunately, but you can use your imagination to really hear how you think it would sound. And I think it would fit really, really well. So let's go, my take on RÜFÜS Du Sol. And there we go. All right, everybody, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like. Right now, I would like you to comment below who you want me to cover in my next videos. If you want to grab the project files, you can click the link in the description below. And if you subscribe to my Patreon, you can also vote for the next How to Make Music videos. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.